Hey, this is Derek Jordan. Welcome to the World Fusion Show, where we bring you the leading innovators in world fusion music. Today, my guest is Payton MacDonald, who is a marimba player and plays the marimba in various ways with various groups. Welcome, Payton MacDonald, to the World Fusion Show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, it's great to have you, of course. And I just wanted to start by asking you a little bit about how you got into music and what your background is in growing up in the Midwest and, you know, how you discovered all this cool music.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Idaho, and I do not come from a musical family. My father was a nuclear engineer, and my mom was a school teacher. She taught English and art. But apparently when I was a baby and I was in the crib, I was always dancing and always indicating that I liked music when it was being played. And as long as I can remember, I was always obsessed with music. I'm old enough that I remember Casey Kasem's Top 40 that I used to listen to every week. And by the time I was about 9, my mom had gotten me started. We randomly had this electric organ in our house, and she had signed me up for lessons, and I liked them okay, but I was having trouble with rhythm on one of the pieces. And the teacher suggested to my mom that she get me a practice pad and a pair of drumsticks so we could just focus on rhythm. And I decided I liked the drumsticks and the practice pad much more than the electric organ. And so that got me into drums. I quickly got a drum set. I started playing in the school bands all through middle school, through high school. And by the time I was in high school, I was really checking out everything I could. Idaho Falls actually had an amazing public library, and that's where I first heard Hindustani classical music, African drumming. That's also where I really discovered Western classical music. And then my dad had a pretty good jazz LP collection. So by the time I was in high school, I was checking out everything I could via the public library and also through our public school system. And then I went on to the University of Michigan for my undergraduate degrees in music, and that was great because Ann Arbor is really a cultural center of the United States. And so all of a sudden I was surrounded by all this music I'd been just hearing via recordings. I was now actually hearing live and in person. So, and then I went to the Eastman School of Music for my master's and my doctorate, and I just continued, studying everything I could. And then I graduated and became a professional, and here I am.
Here you are. Okay, now I was going to ask you about, you've named a wide variety of music you were exposed to, but are there any particular musicians that you were inspired by coming up?
Yeah, just a short list on one hand, because it's really a massive list, but definitely Glenn Gould in the classical world. His approach to piano was very unique and in a way that got me really thinking about how interpreting other people's music can be itself a creative discipline. For jazz, all the great drummers, Max Roach, Elvin Jones, Philly Joe, all that. But if you made me say one jazz musician, it would definitely be John Coltrane, who I discovered in high school and whose recordings have had a profound influence on my life. And then in the global realm, there's many. Of course, my gurus would be the first I would list. But in terms of who first got me going, it was definitely Ravi Shankar. The recordings, the various ones live in New York, live at the Monterey Pop Festival, that was the stuff I was hearing in high school that really set me on this journey with Hindustani music that's been a big part of my life.
That's great. So we're going to go to our first video. Tell us a little bit about this.
Right. So this is the Super Marimba 7. This Super Marimba project I started in 2001. So it's been over 20 years now. And the idea is that I'm playing an acoustic marimba, but I'm amplifying it and feeding the sound into various used to be looping pedals and distortion pedals. Now I use Ableton software, and I do it that way. But it's only me, but it sounds like many marimba players at once. And the music tends to be drone based. It tends to be modal. It tends to be often very groove based. And I bring a lot of Hindustani music elements into that space.
Great. Let's go to the video right now. we are back with Payton MacDonald. We are, well, you know, as world fusion artists, we do a lot of collaboration generally with all kinds of interesting instruments. And I know you're very involved in that as well. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about those collaborations.
Yeah, I've done many over the years. One that is fairly new that I'm particularly excited about is this Super Marimba band. So I'm playing acoustic traditional marimba. Mark Stone, who I know you've also had on the show, is playing the array imbira. Sean Matavetsky, who's a longtime collaborator of mine since 1998. Sean's playing tabla. And then Damon Grant is the fourth person in the group, who's playing basically kind of percussion / drum set kind of setup. So Mark and I first met when we were undergrads at University of Michigan. I was a freshman, and I think he had just come back from his first trip to Ghana. And that's right, and it was his senior year. And Mark back then is just like Mark now. I mean, he was just an incredible musician, so much creativity, so much love of the art form, so much knowledge and facility. And just, you know, from day one, he's always been an inspiration to me, and we've stayed in touch throughout the years. And Mark was actually the one who reached out to me last year, or 2 years ago, I guess now, and suggested that we put together a quartet and do some of the Super Marimba music. So he had been listening to the solo recordings, and I had already orchestrated these out for a marimba ensemble at one point, but Mark had the idea to orchestrate it out for more of a band. And it was a great idea. So Sean was a natural collaborator because he and I had already done a Super Marimba duo recording where I had laid down the tracks and he had sent me stuff remotely during COVID that worked out really beautifully. And then Mark knew Damon Grant. Mark thought he would be a great complement, and he was. Damon's just a wonderful player who brings a lot of knowledge of Cuban music and Brazilian music into the mix as well. So basically what we did is we took the vocabulary of Super Marimba in terms of the way I think about form and structure and tonality and improvisation, and just orchestrated it out. The charts were fairly organized, but fairly bare bones. So there was a lot of room for improvisation, and it was just a fantastic couple of weeks we had together, and then we're working on setting some more stuff up now.
Yeah, so we're going to take a listen to this quartet right now. Let's go to the video. Hey, we are back with Payton MacDonald. We're going to change channels here and go into another aspect of your music, which is your vocalization. Tell us a little bit about what your process in this.
Yeah, so I started off as a Hindustani musician as a tabla drummer, studying with Pandit Sharda Sahai for over 10 years. And then when he passed away in 2011, I decided to redirect my energies into singing Hindustani music. And I became a disciple of the Gundecha brothers, who were the preeminent exponents of Drupad, which is a particularly old and very disciplined and very beautiful style of Hindustani music. So I made many trips over to India in the last 10 years. And on a couple of those trips, I ran into a woman named Ina Phillip, who is a Brazilian now living in Canada, who sings Indian classical music. And we became friends and we started practicing together. And what we found is that our voices were really compatible. And we also were very interested. Our teachers, the way they sing is they're a pair of brothers. And usually in that music, one will sing a phrase and then the other will sing a phrase. They go back and forth. But the unique thing about our teachers is that they would often overlap the phrases a little bit. And sometimes the overlap would be quite long. And to our ears, meaning me and Ina, that overlap reminded us of the Renaissance vocal polyphony tradition from Europe, which is a very rich and deep tradition that's been around since basically the 1400s. And so that was the work we started doing about 7 years ago, was basically bringing the classical music of India in contact with this rich, deep vocal tradition from Europe, which is really something that only we could do because we had been trained thoroughly in both traditions. It was a long road to get to this recording, a very long road. We made 2 other recordings that we eventually took down. I mean, it took us a long time, but we finally got there. And then we brought in Michael Harrison, who's an old dear friend of mine who plays piano, but it's not a regular Western piano. He retunes it to a just intonation scheme to collaborate with us on this particular project.
All right, that's fantastic. So we're going to go check out the video right now. Hey, we are back with Payton MacDonald. I wanted to ask you, Payton, about the unusual ways you've been using the marimba. Tell us a little bit about your approach to that.
Yeah, so one of the things I do that very few marimba players are doing around the world is I work a lot with creating all kinds of unique mallets to play the instrument with. And I also work a lot with preparations, which means I put things on the instruments, sometimes on top of it, sometimes under the bars, that create a lot of different sounds. And the reason I do that is that I'm interested in trying to expand the timbral palette of the instrument, in terms of kind of looking to the future. But in a way, I'm also looking to the past, the very distant past. I mean, out of the continent of Africa, in many places, especially in West Africa, what present day Ghana, Ivory Coast, etc., there are instruments, ballophones, that are used, and specifically the geels, which are instruments that have a lot of buzzing sounds. It's actually part of the instrument. So interestingly, in the West, a lot of times the instrument manufacturers are doing everything they can to get rid of rattles and buzzes because they view it as a kind of noise, as an unpleasant sound. But of course, the instrument makers in many parts of West Africa, they're specifically going for the buzzing. They consider that to be the soul of the instrument, that when the instrument doesn't buzz, it actually loses a lot of life force. So I like to kind of work between these worlds a little bit and see how I can really expand the color and really timbral palette of the marimba.
That's great. Actually, speaking of the buzzing, particularly in the Gil, a lot of Africans say the buzzing is the sound of the ancestors singing along. So they really feel it's a necessary ingredient. Whereas to our ears, a lot of times it sounds a bit distracting, but that's not where they're coming from. All right, so now we're going to go to a video of you doing one of these prepared marimba. And I like this, has a very unique name. Womp Trunkle is the name you gave this piece. So let's go to the video right now. Hey, we are back. Payton MacDonald, I want to just say thank you so much for joining us today on the World Fusion Show and sharing your unique approach to the marimba and other work you're doing.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me on.
It's been great. Take care now. Hey, this is Derek Jordan. Thank you for joining us today on the World Fusion Show. It's been great to have you. And please share and subscribe to the show on Facebook and YouTube, and share with your friends and help us spread this great music all over the planet. I just want to say a big thank you to our supporters, Mackenzie Family Charitable Trust, Chris Pratt, Nancy Feinberg, and Ron Dance for their generous support. And as we always say in the show, remember, think globally, listen locally, and support independent music.